of policy, because yes, it's provided for in the Constitution in that Article 11 that Parliament will enact legislation to support or to have a proper legal framework for culture. But this is 15 years later, and one may wonder why now is when you've mentioned like 2, 3, 4 pieces of legislation that are still undergoing parliamentary processes. And 15 years later, what has been the challenge in as far as enacting these policies?
I think enacting policies and legal frameworks in this country takes a very long time. It is also a costly affair. So I think financial constraints has really been one of the challenges. And besides that, you may recall that there were a number of legislations that were to be developed 5 years after the enactment of the Constitution. From where I sit, many of them have actually not been done. It's taken a while. But I think it behoves upon maybe policymakers like us, the Legislative Assembly, to ensure that enactment of legislation is actually fast-tracked.
What is the challenge when it comes to politicians and matters culture? Is it that they don't give it enough prominence or attention when it comes to matters legislation?
I will unfortunately admit that that seems to be the case. I think we are mainly focused on infrastructure, our own politics, our own economics, to the detriment of culture. And I think it may also be true that many of our politicians do not understand the centrality of culture in national development. And I think for jurisdictions that have embraced that, I think they've been able to develop more than maybe this country. If you are to talk of jurisdictions like France, for instance, culture and heritage plays a very central role. It even contributes a substantial amount to their GDP. So I think it's a high time we also re-centralize the role of culture and heritage for national development.
Yeah.
And to do that, I think we need to put in place the requisite national policies as well as legal instruments to ensure that we safeguard our cultural heritage.
For a country like Kenya, where we have diverse cultures, more than 40 different communities with different cultures, there's definitely a challenge in ensuring that some are not dominated by others. How much of that has already been legislated, and is it even possible to legislate on how to balance some of these cultures, some of them very small?
I think in terms of legislation, our Constitution actually provides very robust articles on even promoting the marginalized communities and their cultures, and ensuring that they are visible across board. We, for instance, have the Minorities Day that is celebrated on the 18th of every December. And the reason why that day is celebrated is to ensure that marginalized communities are also brought to the fore. It is true that legislating culture is a very difficult thing because we are diverse communities. However, we should build bridges between dominant cultures as well as the smaller communities in order to ensure that we all equally contribute to cultural sustainability in this country.
And also at a time when most of the world is looking at adopting a globalized culture, that we say we are now, the whole world is one village. How much of a challenge is it still trying to maintain our culture? Many people may look at it like going backwards, like we're just looking at our history, not adopting the contemporary nature of our lives now.
I personally don't believe in a globalized culture. I think it is, even talking of a globalized culture, it is important to appreciate that we have our own regional diversities. And it is these regional diversities that enrich what you may call national culture, and therefore it is important that we are also able to highlight some of the positive things from those cultures. I think that is, to me, that is a critical thing, and we just don't have to embrace global cultures that are not aligned to our own cultural values, our own norms, as well as our own aspirations as a country. I think each culture has its own logic why it exists, and it is important that that is also respected. And it's due to our diversities of culture that we are a rich country. We are a rich world because all cultural development is informed by the different cultures, and hence the need to respect that. And it is as a result of that, for instance, that institutions such as UNESCO do appreciate the cultural diversity. We, for instance, have the May 15th that is celebrated as a World Day for Cultural Diversity, for dialogue and development. So that is a true attestation that our different cultures are important. And besides that, under the UNESCO 2003 Convention on the Safeguarding of Intangible Cultural Heritage, you will be surprised at the elements that are enlisted. These are elements, some are from very small communities, and indeed these are elements that have made the world viable. By enlisting them, by protecting them, we ensure that their availability is sustained.
Okay. But yet, it is a reality that some people, especially in a globalized environment, some people may look at some of our African cultures as backward. Some of the conventional norms brought about by probably religion and other things may have pushed or influenced the end of some cultural practices, which probably from our end we see they're positive, but from the other people they say those are backward. Is there a clash when it comes to ensuring that our culture is maintained and developed and not contradicting the conventional globalized norms?
There are definitely cultures that have been overtaken by time, what you may call retrogressive cultures that fly against even human rights, practices like female genital mutilation, whereas in the past it had its own logic. But over time and because of other influences, that is something that we also appreciate, that it is a cultural practice that should definitely be dropped. It is harmful and it hinders growth, especially for the young girls. It has health issues. So to me, I think with the interaction of cultures from different worldviews, I think some things have definitely been dropped.
What about, if we may use, and this is just an example, an issue like polygamy, that probably in some African cultures we still feel is the right way to go about it, but globally it's frowned upon?
I think that's a very tricky question to ask, but if we are to speak the truth, polygamy in its time had its own positive things. It was for labor purposes. In the past, maybe diseases were unmanageable. Diseases may have been many, and therefore it was desirable to have many children. There were wars during that time, and therefore it was necessary to have big populations that would support that. But even in the current world, yes, polygamy is detested. But what happens in the contemporary world? How many people have concubines? How many people have girlfriends elsewhere? So I think this is something that needs to be relooked at. If it is relevant for a certain society and if it serves their own interests, then why not? Anthropologists also believe that culture has its own logic, its own ways of doing away with what has been overtaken by time. And if that process is given a chance, then definitely there are some things that will be eradicated automatically. And I think it is all cultures that have that.